Hi guys, this is just to give you an overview of the long distance trek that I'm planning in southwest China over the next few months. The idea is to have a long distance trail which is equivalent to like those in America, like the Appalachian Trail, and like other countries have like Pennine Way in the UK or the Milford Track in New Zealand. China doesn't have any long distance hiking trails as yet, but one of the areas that's been suggested for a long distance track is this part of southwest China, starting from like the Burmese border and the three major river valleys of the Mekong River and the Yangtze River, and further to the west there's the Salween River. And I've travelled quite a bit in these areas before, so I'll give you a kind of look where I'm going to put this sort of potential track, which I think would work and would join up several areas of really great scenery, some mountains and some canyons, and areas that are mostly Tibetan, but not wholly Tibetan. There are also other minorities such as the Lisu and the Nahi people. And it will go, like I say, from the Burmese border, which you can see there on the left, the yellow line, and it'll go up through Yunnan province into Sichuan province. And there are actually two sections. I could actually do a second section which would take me from Sichuan up into Gansu province. But for the moment, I'm looking at about 100-day trip, 3 months, starting here on the northwest corner of Yunnan and eventually getting to my destination of Kangding in Sichuan after 100 days of trekking. And that's working on a kind of estimated 15 kilometers a day. So starting off, the first section will be, like I say, from the Burmese border there, and that's a place called the Dulong River Valley. I've been to most of these places before. I visited the Dulong last year, quite remote, and it's quite temperate because it's on the Burmese border. In the valley itself, it's quite fertile and shouldn't be too cold this time of year. And I'll be going over that mountain trail there. You can see from the Dulong to the Salween River, or the Nujiang as it's known in China, to a place called Gongga Shan. And that would take me maybe 4 days or so. And that goes over mountains of about 3,000, 4,000 meters. And then the next section will take me from Gongga Shan once I'm in the Salween Valley, and that's got a lot of Christian churches in it. And again, this is an area I visited quite frequently, and going from Gongga Shan up to see a friend of mine who lives in a place called Dimalur. There's a trekking guy called Alor, and he's a Catholic Tibetan guy, and he runs treks over this mountain range over the Balagong Pass. And I've already done this trek in the opposite direction from a Catholic church at Sizong. And this time I'll be going the other way through those leech-infested valleys and over a big mountain pass down to the church at Sizong, which is in the Mekong River Valley. You can see that green Mekong River there. And then from Sizong, I'll be going north from Sizong up to the main town of Derqing, which is a Tibetan town, which lies just above the Mekong Valley. And opposite that is the Kawakapo Mountain, also known as Meili Xueshan, which is now quite popular with tourists at a place called Meili Xueshan. And then from Derqing, it's a road walk down to a place called Benzilan, because there's no direct walk over to my next area of interest, which is called Yading, which is quite far to the east. So I'm going to have to follow that road down to a place called Benzilan on the Yangtze River. And here there's a kind of dilemma. There's two ways across to the Yading Three Peaks. One to the north that goes via a place called Shangcheng, which is quite remote. And there's another alternative which I'm thinking of, which would take me, if you can see there, going south in a big long loop, unfortunately, I've marked it as Zhongdian. It's now known as Shangri-La, and that's a very touristy area, but still very nice, ethnically Tibetan. And I'm thinking of going down to Zhongdian and then following the roads there, as you can see, going towards the right, again across some more mountains. That would take me to another river valley. I don't know the name of that river actually, but that's just a fairly minor river, but that's just to the west of these three peaks that you can see now here in the centre, which is known as Yading, Konka Risam Gompa, as Joseph Rock called them. And the problem here is you can only do a circuit of the mountains to clockwise, and I've done this a couple of times already. And the reason I'm thinking of coming is from the south is that means I'll be able to join the kind of clockwise circuit from the south, and then do half circuit through the Yading Three Peaks, which I'm now quite familiar with, to get me over to what's known as the Shuelo River Valley. So you can see there's Mount Jambayang, Mount Shenrezig, Mount Chanadorje. Very touristy, very regulated, so I'll have to be a bit sneaky there to get down to the Shuelo Valley. And then here is where my problems really begin, because this is an area that nobody's really trekked through before. So I'm in the Shuelo Valley, and you can see to the north there's a place called Maya Charjing, which I've been to by car, and that's pretty remote. And I'm thinking, instead of taking that red trail to the north, I might go this green route to the south, which I've not tried across before, but it looks a bit more level, not quite so much high altitude, to get me across to the Meili Valley, which I've been to quite a few times, and the Lancang River that runs through the Meili Valley. I'm now quite familiar with this, and I won't actually visit the Meili Monastery there, which I've visited several times now. I was there last year, but I'll go up the Lancang River from Meili up to another monastery which I visited last year called Yading, and I've seen from Yading Monastery there seems to be a trail that will take me over to my next goal, which is the Yalong River, and this is the unexplored area. It seems there are some trails that will take me across, maybe over 3 days or so. I originally thought I might go to the north, and this is where it gets complicated because there are no crossings of the next river, the Yalong River. There are no bridges. So my thinking is I will go to a big dam that is just being built on the Yalong River, where you can cross, but I'm not sure whether foreigners will be allowed to access that area. But what I do know from Chinese trekkers is there is a ferry that runs from that Yalong River Dam, and it runs to the north. And here I've got two choices. I can go far to the north to an area called Bawalong, which I visited just a few months ago, where I know there is a river crossing and the ferry docks there. And from there I can get to my last stage, which is to Yalong town, where I've got some friends. So that is kind of like plan A. If I can get to Bawalong, I can follow the orange track over to Yalong. Or plan B is to go from the Yalong Dam and go up into the mountains and follow the traditional trekking route, which will take me over to a place called Muti Konka, Meili Gonga, where again I visited recently, and I've got some Tibetan friends who live by that lake there. But the difficult bit is getting up that blue trail up through the mountains along the traditional pass, the Wadzanran Pass, to get to that lake. Now if I can find somebody who will guide me there, I might take that route instead. Otherwise it's going to be the ferry up to the river at Bawalong. But if I do get to the Muti Konka valley, I can then go up that valley there called Sanyalong, which I just travelled to recently, and again I know quite well, which will take me to Yalong. Now Yalong is quite a big town. I visited there quite recently, and this is the final stage. That's to get to Gongga Shan mountain. Now the road to Gongga Shan is fairly well travelled, and there are a couple of side routes there that I could possibly do, but it's basically just a case of staying on the highway to get to Gongga Shan via a place called Yulongshi. And again, I was visiting here just recently. Some very nice, friendly people up that way, and Gongga Shan is very well travelled because it's only a day's or two's sort of road trip now from the major city of Chengdu. So once I'm in the Gongga Shan area, I'm kind of on the home straight, and that will take me into the town of Kangding, where there's a major highway where you can get down to Chengdu in about 4 hours. And Kangding's up in the mountains, but again, I say getting through there from Gongga Shan should be fairly straightforward. And that'll be my final stop on this 100-day trip, which will then take me across the on the highway across the Dadu River, and then as you can maybe see there onto the plain of Chengdu. So that's the end of my first section of trip, which will take me 100 days. And then there is also the potential to extend this trip, if I'm still up for it, to come back and do another couple of months, which would take me through the northern mountains. That will go from Kangding and Damba, Sagunianshang, very well known, and then Markang along the route of the old long march into the grasslands of northern Sichuan. And this is an area I've just travelled through recently by bike, so I know it quite well. And that would take me to a quite well-known area called Jagana, and that's very well visited these days. And eventually, possibly even up across those mountains to a place called Choni, and even as far as Lanzhou. So that's for my next project. So that's just a sort of a, how should we say, putative visit. That's not really planned out yet. But the first part is this 100 days, 3 months trip from the Burmese border across the Dulong, the Mekong, the Yangtze, and also the Salween Valley to start with. And that would take me across to Kangding. So that's the plan. I'll be starting there in mid-April. So I'll be travelling here in May and June and July, which is the rainy season, which is not ideal, but that's the only time it's really warm enough to get across those higher altitude 5,000 metre, 4,000 metre areas.